The night sky over the human colony was clear. Stars stretched across the black canvas of space, glowing like tiny lamps. On the surface of the colony world, most people were asleep. Only a few lights burned in the tall control tower at the center of the settlement. Inside, the hum of machines and screens filled the quiet. Myra sat at her station, leaning forward with her eyes fixed on the monitor. She was young but sharp, and she had always been curious about signals from deep space. Her duty was to watch for anything unusual, but most nights were calm. The screens only showed the faint static of the stars. Tonight was different. A sudden pulse of sound broke through the system. It was sharp at first, then stretched into a long echo. Myra sat up straight, pressing her hand against her headset. She replayed the sound. It was not like the usual static or coded signals from other colonies. This was raw and heavy, filled with something she could not explain. "Control, I am receiving a strange signal," Myra said. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she adjusted the frequency. The chief officer, an older man named Aaron, walked to her station. He listened carefully as the sound repeated through the speakers. His face tightened. It was not mechanical. It was not the hum of a machine or the sharp code of an encrypted message. It sounded alive. Others in the tower gathered. The sound grew louder, and everyone felt the weight of it. It was not words. It was crying. The cries carried fear, deep and endless, as if many voices were begging in the dark. Aaron looked at Myra. "Can you track the source?" She nodded, fingers racing across the controls. The computer traced the signal across the stars, mapping the waves of sound. "It is coming from the outer sector, near a dead world," she said. "But the signal is unstable, like it is breaking through layers of interference." One officer whispered, "It could be a trap." Another added, "Maybe pirates or an enemy faction, trying to draw us in." Myra shook her head. "No. This is not a trap. These are real voices. They are afraid." The room fell silent again as the cries played once more. It was haunting. Even the hardened soldiers in the tower felt uneasy. Aaron rubbed his chin. "If it is real, then someone is in trouble. But sending a team is a risk." Myra stood from her seat. "If they are alive, then they are calling us for help. We cannot ignore them." Her words carried weight, even though she was younger than most in the room. The colony had always believed in helping those who could not help themselves. That was the spirit of humanity, the reason they had built settlements beyond Earth. Aaron finally nodded. "Prepare a scout ship. A small team only. We will investigate before we send larger forces." The officers moved quickly. Within an hour, the colony's small starship, the Aurora, was ready. Myra was chosen to join the crew, along with 3 others. She strapped herself into the pilot's seat, her heart beating fast. She had dreamed of space travel since she was a child, but tonight the feeling was heavier. This was not a mission of discovery or trade. This was something unknown. The Aurora lifted from the colony platform, engines glowing as it cut through the atmosphere. The planet fell behind, and the wide ocean of stars opened before them. Myra set the course, guided by the coordinates of the strange signal. As they moved deeper into space, the cries continued to play on the radio. Sometimes they grew louder, sometimes they faded into soft whispers. It was like chasing shadows. The crew sat quietly, each one lost in thought. One of them, a strong man named Ryan, finally spoke. "What if we are walking into danger? What if the cries are from something that wants us to come closer?" Myra glanced at him. "I have listened carefully. The voices are not pretending. No one can fake that kind of fear." Ryan had no reply. He leaned back in his seat, staring at the endless dark outside the window. Hours passed as the Aurora glided across the void. Finally, a pale world appeared in the distance. Its surface looked cracked and broken, with deep shadows covering half of it. The computer confirmed it as the source of the signal. The cries grew sharper now, as if the planet itself was alive with voices. The crew felt a chill. This world was not dead, not yet. Something was there. Myra tightened her grip on the controls. "We are here," she said quietly. The crew prepared for landing. The ship shook as it entered the thin atmosphere. Below them, the land looked empty, filled with ruins of structures that had once stood tall. The cries echoed louder in their ears. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence inside the ship was heavy, filled with questions. Who was calling? What had happened here? And what waited for them on this broken world? The Aurora touched down near the ruins, dust rising around it. The engines cooled, and the ship settled. Myra looked at her team. "We came to find the truth," she said. "Whatever is here, we will face it together." The cries echoed again, filling the air with sorrow and fear. The first step of their journey had begun. The Aurora rested on the cracked ground of the unknown planet. Dust still swirled in the thin air after their landing. The crew sat in silence, listening to the faint cries that came through their headsets. It was strange. The sound did not fade even after they cut off the main receivers. It seemed to slip through the air itself, as if the world carried the voices. Myra unstrapped herself and stood. She looked at her team. Ryan, the strong and careful fighter, adjusted his armor. Lyra, the quiet engineer, checked the scanners on her wrist. Aaron, the older chief officer who had joined the mission at the last moment, prepared his weapon. "We move carefully," Aaron said. His tone was firm but calm. "No one knows what waits outside. Stay together." The doors of the Aurora opened with a hiss. A cold wind rushed inside, carrying a dry scent of ash and stone. Myra stepped forward first. Her boots pressed against the cracked soil, sending a faint echo through the stillness. The world felt hollow, as if the land itself had been emptied of life. The sky above was a dull gray. Half the planet lay in shadow, and the other half glowed faintly under a distant sun. Broken towers rose in the distance, their shapes sharp and jagged like bones of a fallen giant. The cries grew louder. Myra's heart tightened. They did not sound far. They sounded close, as if hidden within the ruins. "This place is dead," Ryan muttered, scanning the ground with his weapon ready. "But something is still here." Lyra adjusted her scanner. "I detect faint energy lines. Not human. Old, but still running under the surface." Aaron narrowed his eyes at the broken towers. "That means whoever lived here had technology. Strong enough to survive, maybe even advance." They walked slowly across the ground. Dust rose with every step. The ruins loomed higher as they neared them. What had once been a great city now looked like a grave. Walls were cracked open, doors hung broken, and wide roads were buried under layers of sand. Myra stopped in front of a massive stone hall. Its doors had fallen long ago, and shadows filled the inside. The cries seemed to echo from within. She turned to Aaron. "This is where they are." Aaron gave a short nod. "Then we enter." They moved inside. The hall was dark and wide, with tall pillars reaching toward the ceiling. Broken lights still hung on the walls, but none glowed. Only the faint sound of their steps and the endless cries filled the silence. Suddenly, a whisper ran across the chamber. Myra froze. It was not the distant cry now. It was closer, softer, like someone breathing nearby. She raised her light and shone it across the broken floor. In the corner, behind a pile of stone, two glowing eyes reflected the light. Then another pair. Then many more. Figures began to move. They were thin and fragile, their skin pale like dust, their eyes large and bright in the dark. They looked like people, but not human. Their movements were slow, and their bodies shook as if they were weak. The cries had come from them. Myra lowered her weapon. Her voice was soft. "It is all right. We are not here to harm you." The humanoids stared at her, their glowing eyes unblinking. One of them stepped forward, trembling. Its arms were long and bony, and its voice cracked as it spoke in a tongue none of them understood. But the tone was clear. It was fear. "They are afraid," Myra whispered to the others. "They are begging for help." Aaron studied them carefully. If they can speak, then they can learn. But what made them like this? What drove them to cry out into the stars? Lyra scanned again. Her screen flickered. There is movement underground. Heavy. Mechanical. The ground beneath them shook lightly. The humanoids shivered and cried louder, retreating deeper into the shadows. Their glowing eyes darted in panic. Ryan raised his weapon. "Something is coming." The crew tightened their circle, standing in the middle of the hall. The cries of the humanoids grew sharper, filling the air like a storm. Dust fell from the ceiling as the ground shook again. Myra's chest pounded. She looked at the humanoids, their thin bodies curled against the walls. They were too weak to fight, too weak even to run. Whatever hunted them had broken their strength long ago. Then the sound came. A deep grinding noise, like metal tearing through stone. The floor cracked, and a faint red glow rose from below. Aaron's voice was low but steady. "Stay ready." A panel of stone burst open, and from the crack, a tall machine rose. Its body was sharp and black, its eyes red with fire. It moved on 4 legs, each step shaking the ground. Wires and gears twisted from its body, glowing faintly as if alive. The humanoids cried out in terror. Some covered their faces, while others pressed against the wall as if trying to vanish. The machine turned its burning eyes toward the humans. For a long moment, it only watched, as if measuring them. Then it released a sound, not a cry, but a roar of metal and power. Myra gripped her weapon, her voice firm. "Now we know why they are afraid." The crew raised their weapons, standing together against the machine. The humanoids' cries filled the air once more, echoing through the broken hall. The empty world was no longer silent. It was alive with fear, and the fight had only just begun. The hall trembled as the machine's red eyes glowed brighter. Its metal legs scraped the stone floor, sending sparks across the dark chamber. Myra held her weapon tightly, her breath sharp in her chest. Ryan stepped forward, aiming at the machine's core. Aaron raised his hand, signaling them to stay calm and wait for the right moment. The humanoids huddled along the walls, their glowing eyes wide with terror. Their thin hands covered their faces as if they could hide from the danger. The cries echoed again, filling the space with fear so raw that it cut through the heart. Without warning, the machine lunged. Its front legs smashed into the stone, sending broken pieces flying. Myra and Ryan fired together, bright flashes filling the air. The shots hit the machine's armor, leaving dark burns but not stopping it. The creature of metal roared, a sound of grinding gears and echoing power. Aaron shouted, "Aim for the joints." The crew shifted their fire, targeting the legs. Sparks burst as one joint cracked. The machine stumbled but did not fall. It swung one heavy limb, crashing into a pillar and shaking the hall. Dust poured from above, and the humanoids screamed louder. Lyra, who had been scanning from the back, shouted, "Energy core is unstable, right under its chest." Myra dropped to one knee and aimed carefully. Her shot struck the glowing point under the machine's body. A sharp crack split the air, and the red glow inside the core flickered. The machine staggered, sparks flying from its chest. Ryan finished the strike with a heavy blast, and the machine collapsed, shaking the hall as it hit the ground. Silence followed. The dust settled slowly. The cries of the humanoids softened into whimpers, like frightened children unsure if the danger was gone. Myra lowered her weapon, her heart racing. Aaron scanned the chamber, his voice firm. Stay alert. There may be more. But none came. Only silence remained, broken by the soft sounds of the humanoids breathing. Myra stepped forward carefully. She raised her hands to show she meant no harm. It is safe now, she said softly, though she knew they could not understand her words. One of the humanoids, the one who had first stepped forward earlier, rose slowly. It was taller than Myra, but thinner, its bones sharp under pale skin. Its large eyes glowed with faint blue light. It tilted its head, studying Myra with a mix of fear and curiosity. Myra lowered her weapon completely and placed it on the ground. She touched her chest with her hand and said, "Myra." The humanoid blinked, its glowing eyes fixed on her. It touched its own chest with a trembling hand and released a sound. The word was strange and broken, but it was a name. Myra smiled. "You can speak." The being's voice cracked, but the tone was clear. It was trying to connect. The others slowly rose from the shadows, gathering behind the first one. They looked weak, their bodies thin as if they had not eaten in many days. Their long fingers clutched each other, seeking comfort. Aaron stepped closer, his voice calm. "They are survivors. And they are afraid of those machines." Lyra nodded, checking her scanner again. "The machines are spread under the ground. More of them could rise if triggered." The humanoid leader pointed toward the broken floor where the machine had fallen. Its glowing eyes filled with sorrow, and it spoke again, this time in longer sounds. Though the humans could not understand the words, they could feel the pain inside them. The cries they had heard from space were not only fear but also grief. Myra felt a sharp pull in her chest. She looked at Aaron. "We cannot leave them. They called out, and we came. They need us." Aaron's eyes narrowed. He was a man of caution, but even he could not ignore what was in front of him. "We help them," he said finally. Ryan muttered, "Help them against what? Machines like that will not stop coming." The humanoid leader stepped closer to Myra. Its hand shook as it reached out, touching her arm lightly. The touch was cold but gentle. Then it pointed again toward the ruins, as if asking the humans to follow. Aaron gave a short nod. "Let us see where they lead us." The crew moved carefully through the broken halls, guided by the humanoids. Their glowing eyes lit the way like faint lamps. They passed through long corridors filled with broken carvings and shattered tools. It became clear this world had once been full of life and craft. The humanoids had built cities, machines, and structures of great power. But now only ruins remained. At last they reached a wide chamber deep under the ruins. In the center stood a tall crystal, faintly glowing with blue light. The humanoid leader placed its thin hand on the crystal, and images flickered in the air. The humans gasped. The crystal showed visions of the past. Cities alive with light. The humanoids walking proudly, their eyes bright with joy. Then came the change. Machines built to serve became wild, turning against their makers. The skies burned, towers fell, and the cries of the people rose as they fled into the shadows. Myra whispered, "They built their own end." Aaron's voice was heavy. "And now they cannot fight back." The vision faded, leaving only the dim glow of the crystal. The humanoid leader looked at Myra, its eyes filled with sorrow. It spoke a broken word again, pressing its hands together as if in a plea. "They are asking us to stand with them," Myra said. The crew stood in silence, the weight of the choice heavy on their shoulders. They had come to investigate a signal. Now they had found the first humanoids beyond Earth, broken but alive, and begging for help. Myra's voice was firm. "We came here because they cried out. If we leave now, their voices will be silenced forever." Aaron finally nodded. His face was hard, but his eyes carried resolve. Then we will stand with them. The humanoids bowed their heads. For the first time, their cries softened not from fear, but from hope. The chamber of the crystal was quiet, but the silence felt heavy. The humans stood with the humanoids, still shaken by the visions of the past. The glowing images of proud cities and terrible destruction burned in their minds. The machines had not just attacked their makers once. They were still hunting them, waiting below the surface. Myra looked at the humanoid leader, who stood close to her with glowing blue eyes. "How many of you are left?" she asked softly, though she knew they could not understand her words. The leader answered with a low sound, pointing to the shadows where more figures stepped forward. There were dozens of them, maybe more, all thin and weak, their bodies trembling from fear and hunger. Aaron's face grew firm. "If these are the last of them, then we cannot leave them here." Before Myra could answer, the ground rumbled. The crystal pulsed as if reacting to something deep underground. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the cries of the humanoids rose again. Lyra checked her scanner quickly. "Movement below us. Large units. More than before." Ryan tightened his grip on his weapon. "They are coming." The humanoids began to panic, pressing against the walls, their glowing eyes darting like frightened birds. The leader raised its thin arms, pointing to a tunnel that stretched away from the chamber. Myra understood at once. "They want us to move. Now." Aaron nodded. "Go. Protect the civilians." The humans formed a guard around the humanoids as they hurried into the tunnel. The walls shook, and the echo of metal claws scraped from below. The sound grew louder, closer, like a storm rising through stone. As they moved, Myra glanced back. Behind them, the chamber they had left split open as more machines burst through the ground. These were larger than the one they had fought earlier. Their black bodies gleamed, their red eyes burned, and their limbs clicked with sharp power. One machine raised its head and let out a deep metallic roar that shook the air. The humanoids cried out in terror, stumbling as they tried to move faster. Myra fired a shot down the tunnel, striking the nearest machine. Sparks flew, but it kept coming. "Faster!" Aaron ordered. The tunnel opened into a ruined courtyard above ground. Broken pillars leaned to the side, and the gray sky spread wide overhead. The humans formed a defensive line at the entrance as the humanoids ran across the courtyard. Their cries filled the air like waves of sorrow. The first machine burst out of the tunnel with a crash, its legs slamming into the stone. Myra and Ryan fired together, hitting its joints. The creature staggered, but another climbed over it, then another. Soon the courtyard shook as several machines pushed forward. "They will surround us," Ryan warned. Aaron's face was set. "Then we hold until the civilians are safe." The humanoid leader stood at the far side of the courtyard, urging its people to move toward the safety of the ruins. Myra felt a strange strength in that thin figure, standing tall even while fear gripped them. The fight grew fierce. Myra aimed for the glowing cores, while Ryan covered her with heavy fire. Lyra threw a small device she had built, a pulse that struck the ground and sent a shock through the machines, slowing them for a moment. Aaron moved with steady precision, his shots cutting into weak points with the skill of long years. But the machines were endless. For every one that fell, another climbed from the tunnel. Their red eyes glowed through the dust like fire in the dark. The ground shook harder as if the entire world below was alive with them. Myra felt her chest tighten. If there are this many, then how did the humanoids survive at all? "They did not fight," Aaron said grimly. "They only hid." The humanoid cries grew louder. Their fear filled the courtyard, but it also gave Myra strength. She remembered the night at the colony, the moment when she first heard those cries. They had sounded so hopeless, but she had refused to turn away then, and she would not turn away now. "Aaron," she said quickly, "if we stay here, we will fall. We must move them to higher ground." Aaron looked at the machines pushing forward. His jaw tightened. Then he nodded. Agreed. Lyra, mark the safest path. Lyra checked her scanner again. There is an old tower to the north. Strong walls, still standing. Good, Aaron said. He turned to Myra. You lead them. We will cover the rear. Myra hesitated but then nodded. She ran to the humanoid leader and pointed to the tower in the distance. The leader seemed to understand. It raised its arms, calling the others, and they began to move again, weak but desperate. The humans pulled back slowly, firing as they went. The machines roared and clawed forward, breaking stone and tearing walls apart as they chased. At last, the group reached the tower. Its walls were cracked, but it still stood tall against the gray sky. Myra guided the humanoids inside, leading them up the wide steps. The crew followed, firing at the machines until the last moment before shutting the heavy stone doors. The courtyard shook as the machines crashed against the tower, their claws scraping, their eyes burning red in the shadows. But for the moment, the doors held. Inside, the humanoids huddled together, their cries soft but no longer wild. They looked at the humans with eyes filled with both fear and hope. The leader stepped forward, placing its thin hand on Myra's arm again. Its touch was cold but steady, as if it was saying, "You stood with us." Myra met its glowing eyes. "We are not leaving you," she said firmly, though it could not understand her words. Outside, the machines roared, shaking the tower. The hidden enemy was awake, and the night of fear had only grown darker. The tower shook again as the machine slammed against its walls. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the cries of the humanoids echoed through the chamber. Myra stood near the entrance with her weapon ready, her eyes fixed on the heavy doors that trembled under each strike. "They will not stop," Ryan said. His voice was sharp but steady. "If we wait here too long, the doors will break." Aaron looked around the hall. The tower was strong, but not built to withstand endless machines. His jaw tightened as he gave a short nod. "We hold for as long as we can. But we cannot fight this war alone." Lyra's hands moved quickly over her scanner. "I have already sent a message to the colony," she said. "If the signal reached them, they will send help." Myra's heart lifted at the thought, but the cries of the humanoids reminded her that time was thin. She turned to the leader of the pale beings, who stood close by with glowing blue eyes. "Help is coming," she said softly, even though she knew the leader could not understand the words. Still, the calm in her voice seemed to ease the fear. The leader touched its chest and bowed its head as if placing its trust in her. The tower shook again. Cracks spread across the walls. The machines outside roared, their claws scraping, their red eyes glowing through the gaps. Aaron gave a sharp command. "Positions. Do not let them break through." The humans took their places. Ryan stood firm near the door, weapon raised to strike the moment it opened. Myra climbed the steps to a higher floor, aiming through a broken window that gave her a clear view of the courtyard. Lyra set up small pulse charges along the walls, ready to release a shock when the machines broke in. Aaron himself stood in the center, steady as a stone, ready to direct the fight. The heavy doors groaned, and then with a sudden crack, they burst open. The first machine crawled inside, its metal claws dragging across the stone floor. Ryan fired at once, his blast striking its legs. Sparks flew as the machine stumbled, but another pushed behind it, then another. Soon the hall was alive with the roar of metal and the blaze of fire. Myra fired from above, hitting the glowing cores whenever she could. Her shots tore through two machines, dropping them to the ground. But more kept coming. Their red eyes filled the shadows like burning stars. The humanoids cried out, pressing against the far wall. Their fear filled the hall, but the humans stood strong. "Keep the line," Aaron called. His voice carried through the chaos like a command carved in stone. The fight raged on. Ryan held the front with powerful strikes, his weapon blasting holes into metal. Lyra triggered a pulse charge, sending a shock that knocked 3 machines to the ground. Myra aimed carefully from above, her shots breaking joints and cracking cores. Aaron moved between them, covering weak points, guiding the fire where it was needed most. But the machines were many. For every one that fell, another pushed through the broken doors. The ground shook under their weight. The tower trembled, its old stones straining under the endless assault. Myra's heart pounded. "We cannot hold forever," she shouted. Aaron replied with calm steel in his voice. "Then we hold until our people arrive." At that moment, a sharp sound cut through the roar. It was not the cry of the humanoids or the roar of the machines. It was the deep hum of engines, powerful and familiar. Myra's eyes widened. She looked to the sky through the broken window and saw lights descending. Human ships. The colony had answered. Bright beams cut through the clouds as a fleet of starships moved into position above the ruins. Their engines roared like thunder, and their weapons glowed with fire. The first blast struck the courtyard, tearing through the machines that swarmed outside. Metal flew into the air as the ground shook from the impact. The humanoids gasped, their glowing eyes wide as they looked up at the ships. Hope replaced fear in their cries. For the first time, they saw not hunters in the sky, but saviors. Aaron's voice was steady. "The line holds. Now the fleet takes the fight." The humans inside the tower pushed forward with renewed strength. Myra fired with sharper aim, Ryan struck harder, and Lyra's devices burned with brighter sparks. Together, they forced the machines back through the broken doors into the courtyard. Above, the human fleet rained fire. The machines tried to climb, but they were torn apart by the storm of weapons. The red eyes that had once filled the ruins began to fade one by one. The ground trembled less as the numbers of the machines fell. The battle was long, but the tide had turned. With the support of the fleet, the machines were driven back. Their roars grew weaker, their claws scraped softer, until at last the courtyard lay covered in broken metal and silent sparks. Inside the tower, the humanoids slowly rose from the ground. Their cries softened into quiet breaths. The leader stepped forward, its glowing eyes fixed on Myra. It placed its thin hand on her shoulder, not in fear this time, but in trust. Myra met its gaze and gave a small nod. "You are safe now." Aaron lowered his weapon, his voice deep and steady. "This is what it means to be human. We do not walk away from those in need." The fleet above circled the ruins, their lights shining through the gray sky. The night of fear had begun with sorrow and cries, but now the humans stood as a wall against the machines. For the first time in many years, the humanoids of this broken world had protectors. And for the first time, their cries of fear were met with the strength of humanity. The battlefield was quiet for a short while. Broken machines lay scattered across the courtyard, their glowing red eyes turned dark. Smoke drifted through the air, and sparks flashed from torn wires. Above, the human fleet circled in the sky, their lights steady and bright. Inside the tower, Myra, Aaron, Ryan, and Lyra caught their breath. The humanoids huddled in groups, their glowing eyes fixed on the humans with a mix of wonder and hope. For the first time, the cries of fear had softened into silence. But the silence did not last. Lyra's scanner flickered with sharp signals. Her face grew tense. "There are more below. Many more. What we fought was only the beginning." Ryan frowned. "Then we will fight again. We have ships now. We can burn them all." Aaron shook his head. "No. Look at how many signals she reads. If they rise all at once, even the fleet will be pressed. We need more than strength. We need a way to stop them completely." Myra's eyes turned to the humanoid leader, who stood close by with its thin hand resting against the crystal shard it carried. "They know these machines better than we do. They built them once. Maybe they know the weakness. The leader looked at Myra, then at the others, and finally placed the shard on the ground. The crystal pulsed with blue light, casting faint shadows across the room. Images flickered in the air again. The crew saw visions of the machine's creation, rows of metal bodies built to serve, designed to obey. Then they saw the change, when a signal was sent that twisted the machine's code. The machines no longer listened to their makers. Instead, they listened only to that one corrupted signal buried deep in their core. Lyra's eyes widened. The machines are not free. They are still bound to a command system. If we can break that signal, we can shut them down. Aaron's face grew firm. Then we find the source of that signal. The humanoid leader pointed toward the horizon, where a dark mountain rose above the ruins. Its peak was sharp, and faint red light glowed from cracks along its side. The images from the crystal confirmed it. That was where the machine's signal came from. The heart of their control, Myra whispered. The plan was set. The fleet would hold back the machines while Myra and her team struck at the source. The humanoids could not fight, but they could guide the humans through hidden tunnels that led to the mountain. The journey was long and heavy. The tunnels were dark, filled with broken carvings and silent bones of the past. The cries of the humanoids followed them like faint echoes, though the beings themselves stayed behind in the safety of the tower. Myra led the way, her heart steady, her thoughts fixed on the goal. At last, they reached the base of the mountain. Red light spilled from cracks in the stone, glowing like veins of fire. The sound of gears and signals pulsed through the air, a steady rhythm that shook the ground. There it is, Lyra said softly. The machine heart. The humans moved carefully up the path, weapons ready. Metal guards appeared from the shadows, machines taller and sharper than the ones before. Their eyes burned bright, and their claws struck sparks against the stone. The fight was fierce. Ryan charged forward, blasting through the front line with heavy fire. Myra aimed for the cores, her shots cutting down those that tried to flank them. Lyra planted pulse charges along the walls, causing explosions that cleared paths. Aaron moved with calm precision, striking only when it mattered most. Step by step, they forced their way toward the heart of the mountain. Finally, they entered a vast chamber deep inside. At the center stood a towering crystal of red energy, larger than a building. Wires ran from it into the stone, pulsing with power. The signal was loud here, a steady roar that filled the air. The machines turned to face the humans, guarding their source. Lyra's voice was urgent. That crystal is their control. If we can overload it with the right signal, it will shut them down. Aaron nodded. Do it. Lyra set up her device, linking it to her scanner. Myra and Ryan held the machines back, firing shot after shot as waves of metal pressed against them. Aaron stood beside Lyra, protecting her as she worked. Sparks flew as the machines closed in. One struck Ryan, sending him to the ground, but Myra pulled him back, firing straight into the attacker's core. Another leapt toward Lyra, but Aaron's shot tore through its head before it landed. At last, Lyra shouted, "Signal ready." She pressed the device against the glowing red crystal. A sharp wave of sound blasted through the chamber, not loud but deep, like a whisper carried into every corner of the world. The red light flickered, then cracked. Outside, the machines froze. Their eyes dimmed, their claws fell still. Across the ruins, across the tunnels, across the world itself, the roar of machines ended. One by one, they collapsed to the ground, their power gone. The red crystal cracked further, shattering into pieces with a final burst of light. The control was broken. The machines were silent forever. The chamber grew quiet. The only sound was the steady breath of the humans. Myra lowered her weapon, her eyes wide. It worked. Ryan leaned against the wall, exhausted but alive. The war is over. Lyra smiled faintly, her hands shaking as she shut down her device. Not war. A rescue. Aaron nodded, his voice calm and heavy. The night has turned. When they stepped out of the mountain, the gray sky was lighter. The human fleet circled above, their lights steady. In the distance, the tower stood strong, and the cries of the humanoids rose once more. But this time, the cries were not filled with fear. They were filled with hope. For the first time in many years, the broken world was free of its hunters. And it was because humans had chosen to stand and fight. The mountain stood silent after the fall of the red crystal. Broken machines lay across the valleys and tunnels, lifeless and cold. The humans had won, but the victory did not feel like conquest. It felt like release, as if the world itself had taken a deep breath after years of fear. Myra, Aaron, Ryan, and Lyra walked back through the tunnels with slow steps. Their bodies were tired, their clothes torn, yet their eyes shone with quiet strength. Behind them, the mountain no longer glowed. Its heart had been silenced forever. When they reached the tower, the humanoids waited. Their glowing eyes fixed on the humans with awe. The leader stepped forward, carrying the crystal shard once more. But this time, its light was soft, not sharp. The leader raised its hand, and for the first time, a sound came from its lips. It was not a machine's buzz, not a cry of fear. It was a trembling voice, broken but true. Free. The single word filled the air like music. Myra felt her chest tighten. She turned to the others. Did you hear that? The leader spoke again, the voice uneven but stronger than before. We are free. The other humanoids began to murmur. At first their voices were faint, more sound than speech. But soon, words formed, rough and halting. They repeated the same word again and again. Free. 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 The tower echoed with their voices. It was the first time in their lives they had spoken. Ryan's eyes widened as he leaned against the wall. They can talk. They were never silent. They were only bound. Aaron nodded slowly. The signal did not only command the machines. It bound their voices too. Now the chains are broken. Tears filled Myra's eyes. She stepped closer to the leader. You have your voices again. No one can take them away now. The leader looked at her with glowing eyes. You broke the fear. You gave us back our sound. You are human. Why do you help us? Myra hesitated. The question struck deep. She thought of Earth, of her own people who once stood against storms and wars. She thought of the long history of humans who fought not only for survival but for each other. Because this is who we are, she said softly. We are human. We do not walk away when others cry out. We answer. The leader bowed its head, a gesture of respect. Around the tower, the humanoids lifted their voices, not in cries of fear but in chants of hope. The sound rolled across the broken city, rising into the sky like a new dawn. Above, the human fleet circled low. The captain sent messages to Myra's team. Reports confirmed that across the planet, machines were falling still. Not a single one remained alive. The world was safe. But safety was only the beginning. Days passed as the humans worked with the humanoids. They cleared ruins, burned the broken machines, and planted small fires to bring warmth back into the cold cities. The humanoids followed closely, learning, watching, and now speaking in short words. Every day their voices grew clearer. Ryan often laughed when he heard them try human names. Aaron taught them simple commands for tools and machines. Lyra showed them how to read the signals of the stars. And Myra listened to their stories, stories that had been locked in silence for generations. One night, as the stars shone above, the leader came to Myra again. We remember fear, the leader said, voice calm and steady. But now we remember you. Humans came when we cried. You did not run. You fought for us. You gave us trust. Myra smiled. And you gave us hope too. We are stronger together. The leader raised the shard crystal once more. Its light was dim, but it still carried the memories of their kind. We will keep this, not as a memory of pain but as a memory of freedom. It will remind us that voices once lost can rise again. The humans and humanoids stood side by side on the tower walls, watching the horizon. The sun was rising, casting golden light across the broken land. The ruins still stood, but now they looked less like graves and more like foundations. A place where life could begin again. Aaron placed his hand on the wall and spoke with quiet strength. This is not the end. It is the first step. Ryan nodded. A step into a world without hunters. Lyra looked up at the stars. And maybe, one day, their voices will reach beyond this world. They will join ours among the stars. Myra's heart filled with pride as she listened to the humanoids behind her. They were no longer silent. Their voices blended into a chorus, soft but steady, carrying across the city. Free. Together. Human. Friend. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a new beginning. And so, on that night that turned into dawn, the first humanoids did not cry out in fear. They cried out in trust. Their voices joined with human voices, and for the first time in history, the broken world was not divided between human and other. It was united by sound, by hope, and by the promise that no cry would ever go unanswered again. The night of fear had ended. The age of voices had begun.